The Strategic Education Committee meeting.
The spring textbook adoptions with Robin Jones and Christy James. 10 minutes, please. And I'm going to try and keep... Stop playing with your food.
Please don't disturb the stolen goods back.
Okay, Reverend Mack is going to time us. This is 10 minutes, and could everyone please hold their questions to the end of each one of the sections, please. Thank you.
Motion to approve.
Don't even talk about it. We already read the materials.
Motion to approve.
Okay, go.
We could just go to the advance the next slide. Yeah.
So our goals today from the learning services.
Is this the textbook adoption? Because it doesn't.
Yes.
Yes.
We always like to provide a big overview and then do a deep dive in each topic.
So we're looking to seek approval on the latest spring textbook adoptions as recommended by the committees, the various committees, and Robin Jones will be doing that in a few seconds. Also receive an update on the social and emotional learning supports in the area of mental health. We have Jennifer Coker who will be coming up to present that as well. And also on the progressive discipline plan, the work that has been underway, and Ms. Coker will also be doing that.
And then you'll be hearing from Bridget Berry, Sharon Randall, and Steve Larson. They'll be sharing their PDSA plans.
May I ask that because only one of the things that's fixing to happen is an action that we vote on that before we move out of the textbooks and into the other reports.
Yep.
You are up, Robin.
Well, I'm submitting before you the three textbooks that were submitted for. It's a low enrollment course textbook that the committee did review and including staff across the district to select these three textbooks. We're seeking approval.
No.
Any questions?
No.
Okay.
So, there's nothing about those textbooks in this presentation, only what we received.
Correct.
That is correct.
Okay.
Move to approve.
So do we make a motion?
So I move to approve
Second.
the instructional materials recommended for use in Charleston County School District by the Textbook Adoption Committee for the subjects in the attached recommendation and justification document.
Do I have to go one by one, or can I say all?
No, you need to go one by one.
Okay.
Okay, for Latin.
Mr. Hollingshed?
Aye.
Mr. Stobbs?
Aye.
Reverend Collins?
Yes.
Ms. Darby?
Yes.
Mr. Scopes?
Yes, ma'am.
Reverend Mack? Yes. And I also say approve. So it's unanimous.
Great.
We did them all together.
Yep.
Okay,
Awesome.
well, thank you.
Thank you.
Aren't we efficient? Jennifer Coker.
Good morning. Good afternoon. Sorry. It's Monday. Feels like Thursday. So I'm here today to discuss where we are in our progress for social emotional learning with mental health. Just, could you advance? Do we have a clicker? Do I need a clicker or you got it? Okay. So, all right, there we go. So if you look at this first slide, it kind of introduces, it continues with our multi-tiered system of support. Typically the I guess rhombus in the top right corner, we talk about both ends of the spectrum. When we talk about social emotional learning and mental health, we talk about what we do for all kids, and then we scaffold for the students who are still struggling. So this is just a graphic of some of the things that we have district-wide in the various tiers. Now each school is working on their own continuum map so they can share what they have at their school levels, and I'm compiling that as well. But so as for our universal supports, obviously we have our MTSS, our multi-tier system support framework. We have our PBIS initiative, positive behavior intervention supports. We have social emotional learning curriculums in several schools, and you received a document that mapped out the various areas that we cover in which tiers those different things fell into with the board agenda. So we have school counselors and school psychologists assigned to all schools who can also support students on the tier 1 level. So we want to talk more today about what we're doing on the tier 2 and tier 3 levels. Obviously our school counselors and our school psychologists can provide additional group work at the school level, which would be what we do in our tier 2. We also have special ed therapists who works with groups of students who are with special needs, who need additional support for social emotional. And then we have district social workers who can do groups at our schools and do in many of our targeted support schools. And then some of our schools have communities and schools counselors through grants or that they have purchased who also do groups with students who need another layer of support. And then, of course, for our Tier 3 students, this is mostly focused on individual work with students. And so we have mental health counselors, and I'm going to go over what those numbers look like in a minute, as well as telemental health, which is a partnership with MUSC. Our special education therapists do work one-on-one with students as well. And of course, our social workers do work one-on-one with families and students as needed. So for our outside providers, the partnerships that we've worked on over the last few years, so communities and schools, you can see the breakdown. They're in 14 of our schools. The Department of Mental Health is now currently serving students in 67 schools. And then our telemental health initiative with MUSC is now serving students in 13 schools. Department of Mental Health and the telemental health are available to any student in any school, and people will serve them, or telemental health is virtual service, but these are actually schools with students being served by one of those entities.
So to clarify, if I'm in one of the middle schools that's not one of those four, and tomorrow I need the services of telemental health, if this meeting were on Wednesday, that thing would say 5.
Correct. Okay. Absolutely. And the schools have a referral mechanism for that, and that's all done through mental health.
So all schools.
If I forget, can you tell me how that works?
Yes, I can briefly tell you. Telemental health is a trauma-focused therapy, and it's done virtually. So we have to screen the students to make sure they can handle a virtual experience for therapy. So the computers are provided by MUSC to the school. The school has to identify a location that has someone supervising right outside of the area. So usually it's in the guidance office or something like that. And the therapy happens virtually with the counselor at MUSC and the student at the school. If the parent needs to be in the therapy, if it's family therapy, they also provide an iPad or a laptop to the home so they can do virtual therapy for all of the family as well.
And this is a cost to the family?
It's at no, well, it's insurance-based, on a mental health is insurance-based, telemental health is actually free because it's a grant right
It's a
now.
grant.
But as it expands, there may be additional.
So to clarify, the Department of Mental Health Services and the telemental health services are available to every one of our schools.
Absolutely. Any student can have a referral.
But communities and schools is only in 14 of our schools.
Correct. And some of that is grant and some of that is school funded with their funds. And the Department of Mental Health does bill Medicaid or insurance for those students, and it is just like going to a doctor. You have to keep your appointments and you have to see a therapist as well as a psychiatrist at every so many months. You have to see the psychiatrist. So I just wanted to give you kind of an update on the growth of our numbers with mental health in our schools. So you'll see in October our open case numbers up there, 937. And then as of April 26th, we have 1,304. So that's a growth of 367 students, which is a 39% increase in students participating in mental health. And it's broken down on there by constituent districts so you can see where the growth is occurring. Obviously, District 3 is really expanded, as well as District 9 and 4. Those are our largest 3 areas. And as a school has more cases, the counselor will be there more often. So if they have 1 or 2 cases, the counselor just goes by and meets with those couple of students. But when they get to 8 or 9, they actually spend a whole day in that school. And if they go, as they continue to increase, the days of service continue to increase. And mental health, this is based on our global contract. They continue to add counselors as needed with the global contract. Some of our schools have counselors based on them funding them with Title I or GOF or whatever fundings, and then the global contract's on top of that. So if my school bought 2 days and that counselor's already maxed out, the global contract can add another day at that school. So we're not excluding the schools who decide to purchase. We can build upon that for them if they need it. And we do have some schools that have purchased a couple of days and have so many kids they've gotten a couple more days through the global contract. Now this is telemental health. The numbers are much smaller, obviously, now because their target population is very specific. They have to be a trauma case and they have to meet certain criteria. But you can see the numbers from 16-17. We have 13 students, and this year we have 28. So we've increased those numbers in perspective really well. And as well as schools, we've gone from 5 schools to 13. So we are increasing that across the district as well. Certain students don't do well with the telemental health, but some students it's actually a preferred method for them. So we're really trying to push that in certain schools and in certain cases for kids. So a couple of celebrations. We do have access to mental health supports for all students in CCSD through the global contract with mental health and through the telemental health with MUSC. The two entities combined, we've increased to 382 more students this year that are receiving individual therapy. We have 67 schools now with a mental health presence on their campus at some point in time during the week. And we project to maintain and maybe even increase our supports for next year, which is really important that we can maintain those for next year in our schools. And we have Second Step, which is one of our tier 1. We did with all of our 4K last year, if you remember. We presented some data on that. And we do have the materials to expand that to kindergarten for next year already. And so we also are going to have 12 people trained to be trainers in restorative practices, so we can begin to train ourselves locally for teachers that want to learn about how to implement restorative practices into their schools. And then last slide for this part, we have some considerations. We do have to remember that parents do have the right to decline services with mental health or telemental health, and we have had that occur.
Very much. Does it happen a lot?
It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen sometimes. And if you have insurance and not Medicaid, it's a sliding scale, so sometimes those services, they can find other places at a comparable rate, or they might be more convenient. It depends, but they can decline. It's a small percentage. We do need to be thinking forward about the Second Step expansion if we want to roll that into first grade the following year.
What is Second Step?
It's a social emotional learning curriculum. It's explicit instruction for students in the classroom. We had that cute little video from Drayton Hall.
Okay.
We do have, this is important consideration, we have 2 partnerships or grants that fund mental health counselors that ends next June of 2019. So we have the Integrated Systems Framework Grant, which provides counselors 2 full days a week in 8 schools. And then we also have the LINKS program, which is funded by Trident United Way, which ends next summer as well, and they fund full-time counselors in 7 schools. So that's why I said we can maintain or even grow for next year, but when those 2 programs come out, we're looking at a deficit of 15 schools that have pretty intense services right now. So planning forward, we have to think about how we're going to fill that gap in the future. I'm good. That was my last slide.
Oh.
Yes.
So, you said we're projected to maintain or slightly increase services for the 18-19 school year. Is that in the is maintain in the budget, or is expansion in the budget?
So
We have a budget in front of us. If we make no changes and we're voted to approve it, how does that sentence read?
So the global mental health contract is actually not funded with GOF. It's funded with at-risk money from the state, and it is funded for next year. The 2 grants, well, one grant has some carryover that may allow us to expand. That's where the expansion might come.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
There's not a budget item in GOF for this right now.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Michael.
I'm noticing that there's been, unfortunately, increases with the number of children that we're providing services to. So my question is, how are we measuring that what we're providing is working, or of course impacting the child in a positive way? What rubric are we using to determine that? I mean, well, yeah, okay, we went from 937 open cases to 1,304, but are we providing anything better in addition to what we've been providing before? How are you measuring that?
So the measure for this is individual therapy. And so obviously students or parents can come out of that when they want to, and so sometimes we don't have a complete therapy cycle, so that is tough to measure progress. But most of those referrals come out of the multi-tiered systems of support team doing individual problem solving on a student, so they've made a referral for this. And so that team tracks that student's intervention at the school level. They usually look at discipline or time out of class and those kind of things. So the school tracks that individual student data, and that's how they got to needing a tier 3 intervention. So they would have started with what they do for all students, and then they would have most likely moved them into a group for counseling in one of those groups we talked about. And if they weren't successful based on the measures they selected, they would have then moved them to the tier 3 group. If a student does have mental health, serious mental health issues, the counseling may continue for years. And so you still may see spikes in their behavior, particularly if it's trauma focused, because things can remind them of those trauma events. So we do see students who do really well and have 6 months of really improved data academically and behaviorally, and then something occurs and they have a decline again. So the long-term data is really hard to collect. We kind of live in these short 6-week cycles with kids on, are we improving this 6 weeks, and if something happens, what happened, and how do we adjust what we're doing? This is truly individualized, and so at a district level, it's kind of hard to see that impact. It's much easier for the school team to see it on that student's day-to-day activity in the building.
Because I'm not aware of how mental health supports work when it comes to dealing with children from severe to non-severe. But I do think as a system we need to be able to identify, and if it gets to a place where we're not able to provide that level of what they need to be able to make sure that they can get that assistance somewhere. So I was glad to see that NUSC is working with the telehealth, the telemental health piece. Are we looking, or are you looking to go into possibly an MOU with NUSC to expand their presence in our schools when it comes to being able to provide services to our children who we may identify as having some mental health issues?
So we do have a couple of schools who do have counselors from MUSC on site, and they've worked those relationships out themselves. So we've really focused on the telemental health piece because a lot of our students are trauma focused, and they have the ability to serve across the district. We have talked to them a few times about looking at interns coming in to help in the schools as far as therapy. So there are some conversations. We do have an MOU for the telemental health, but we would need to expand that. And we're currently working on the next MOU with Department of Mental Health as well. And they actually are looking at some virtual mental health too, expanding that direction.
Cindy?
So I think the reason correct me if I'm wrong, the reason we provide mental health services to our students is to help them pass school, to help them take advantage of the opportunities that a K-12 education offers, as opposed to having these traumas or whatever overwhelm them to the point that they cannot focus on learning. So from that standpoint, I feel like that ought to be quantified somehow in a reduction of expulsions, suspensions, or increasing grades or something, because the purpose is so that the child learns. So I feel like we ought to be able to quantify that. And certainly I don't want any individual stuff, but we're talking about the potential to have to pay 15 full-time counselors in 2 years. We're not doing that. We're a school district. We're doing that so the other side of the equation, so they can learn, so they can progress, so they can leave our schools. Shouldn't we be measuring that in some quantifiable standard?
So we can measure the individual students' growth on grades and academics. We can look at their attendance, particularly as an important indicator, as well as referrals. I know that most of the time we think about when mental health is involved, the students are acting out. We have a large number of students who are receiving mental health counseling because of internalizing behaviors, cutting, attempts at suicide, drug use, those kind of things. And so it's not always a disciplinary action at school that means that they're going to have mental health services. So I think to look at impact on education, it might be easier or better to look at maybe grades and attendance, because the discipline may not even be a factor for some students. So
reduction in incidents that cause a referral.
Yeah,
right.
Certain students.
So I think we ought to be able to somehow make sure this is working.
Right. And we do have a screener that we're using in some of our schools that we do pre and post screening on students that does give us some indicators on their level of trauma or their level of experiences that they're having, which could be used. We're using it in 4K right now. And we're actually looking at a new screener for next year that can be used K-12 that could give us some indicators. I believe it was mentioned earlier that Fast Bridge screening could be used to progress monitor these students as well, which has the social emotional indicators inside of it, which would help us to gather this information in a better package. Because right now I don't necessarily have names for those 1,304 students in my office.
Right.
So tracking their data is really based back on those teams. So for me to pull those, I don't get that detailed data from them. I get, obviously for many reasons, I don't know every student's name that's on that list.
Right. I'm just thinking that if we're fixing to go into an area where we're going to have to decide in a fixed budget where to take money from in order to put money to, like we need to get ready for funding that as the as the leaders of the district, y'all need to get ready to explain how this is more valuable than something else we were spending the money on, because it's not we're going to go find new money, it's something else is going to have to get less money.
Correct, I didn't understand that.
I think that we would know if we took away all of those mental health counselors. We would know in about
I was
a
going to say,
day.
I don't know, there's got to be some quantifiable measurements.
And there would be your proof, because sometimes you don't know that the kids need it until
No,
they
these
have
are
acted out.
referred kids. Clearly, I think that if we took it all out of the schools, we'd see a change in behavior.
In an hour.
So what I would expect is clearly, we put it in schools, we see a change.
Reverend Mack,
Yeah, time is up. We're on now
Thank you.
progressive discipline. Right?
Thank you, Reverend.
thank you for being such a good time.
So I have a team coming forward, they're gonna fill in around me, and they're gonna talk the most. So I'm just gonna start out while they come up, and then when they're all seated, we'll get them to introduce themselves. Mr. Pruitt, you can go ahead and advance to the next one. So the Progressive Discipline Plan is a document that we've been, working on and revising over the last few years. And just as a reminder, it has behaviors and it has responses for administrators. It's a guide for the administrators to use when they're processing office referrals. Administrators cannot assign a more exclusionary a consequence that is on there without permission from their executive director. So if it says a detention, they can't move to ISS without permission. Although, if it says ISS and they have a reason to think that that's not the best thing and they want to do something different, like a Saturday school or detention that's lower, they can certainly do that, because there are times when they're extenuating circumstances about life. So when you look at the PDP, when you got it on email, it's got a lot of boxes. The expectation is they complete all of the things in those boxes, the interventions and the consequences. So I'm just going to go over the team really quickly, and then they're going to take over from me, Mr. Pruitt. So on our elementary project team, we don't have all of these members here, but we do have Brittany Hahn, who's a teacher at Laurel Hill, Kayla Goodline, who works in my department, and Siobhan Coakley, who works in my department, and then Natasha Jones, who's an AP at Meminger. We have other people on the team that couldn't join us today, first day of testing. And then our secondary team, we have some of our members from the secondary team with us today. We have Jared Smith, who's an AP at Wando, and Jermaine Joyner, an AP at Wando. And we have Mr. Middleton, who's a teacher at Garrett. So this is just a small piece of our team. They're going to kind of go over our process for this year, and I'm going to turn it over to them.
All right, the evolution of PDP started back in August of 2016. And originally we did pre-K through second, third through fifth, and 6th through 12th. Those were the original 3 PDPs. In September of 2016, the elementary PDP was revised. In October of 2016, the high school PDP was revised. Then back in January of 2017, we really looked at 6th through 12th, we need to break that up. Middle school needs their own PDP. So we created the middle school PDP, and then of course, August 18, 2017, all of the PDPs, all of the levels were revised.
And in 2017-18, this school year, we began in September with the project teams meeting monthly to make adjustments to the code of conduct and the PDP. From September until April 17th, the project teams met for all-day retreat. Our goals were to align with new state regulations, create banding of similar codes on level 1 and for level 2, and we launched into a conversation regarding our universal procedures by level. What is it that we would like to provide for interventions and consequences? April 17th, we also facilitated activity with the Teachers of the Year to provide input. So that evening, we went to the Teachers of the Year roundtable meeting where the Teachers of the Year provided feedback on the PDP. April 19th, we facilitated the activity at the principals meeting with principals and teacher leaders. And April 20th through 30th, the project teams continue to meet to make revisions and also to respond to the action items that were submitted at each of the roundtable discussions.
The major changes to the 2018-2019 PDP, we have level changes, clarified definitions, added codes, deleted codes, and banded infractions. These will be explained in subsequent slides. And I want to say that in general, we came up with revisions by receiving feedback from different teacher groups and district administrators. We consulted with the South Carolina State Department of Education to make sure our levels aligned, and we regularly met as a group to discuss possible changes.
All right, banding is something that is new in the PDP this year, proposed PDP this year. We looked at some of the PDPs across the district and had some feedback from some of the teachers and other members of our schools. And what they wanted to do is take some of our like behaviors that they had different coding definitions and banded them into one area so that we can provide intensive and timely responses and interventions to those behaviors. We have some examples. We'll talk about all of the changes that we have, but we have an example of an elementary banding that we did, and they just used just one of them, fireworks and miscellaneous weapons. So we looked at these behaviors that were very similar. If you go to the...
So, if I may, are you saying these are now the same, defined as the same infraction?
They're not defined as, they still have their own definition. So there's still two different offenses, but the behaviors were like behaviors.
Right.
So the interventions and the consequences are now combined together.
So if I do one fireworks, that's first offense. If I do one miscellaneous weapons, that's second offense.
Yes.
Okay.
And as you look at the high school, that probably gives you a more visual example. Cutting activity and cutting class are basically the same exact definition, except for the location where you're supposed to be. So if you're in the pack, you're supposed to be in the pack and you cut, you get cutting activity. You're supposed to be in the classroom and cut, you get cutting class. So instead of having its own individual timeline progression, we combine those behaviors together so we can provide those supports more in a timely manner.
6 occurrence.
Michael, you're part of it. Why wouldn't you?
Just wait.
The major changes we made to the elementary PDP, we started looking at the banding, like we just saw on the last slides. We decided to ban fireworks and miscellaneous weapons because they're similar, indecent exposure and pornography, obscene gesture and profanity, and alcohol and drug usage. So now those all fall in their own bans. We also made level adjustments to bite, pinch, spit, and computer violation based on feedback we had received. So we moved those from level 1 to level 2. And then based on the state codes, we moved profanity towards students from a level 2 to a level 1. We also moved theft and larceny from a level 2 to level 3 based on the state code changes. We looked at the definitions for all of the codes, and a few of them based on feedback or also looking at the other grade levels, we decided to change off limits so that it reflected the high school definition because that had been given some work. And then major disruption, obscene gesture, computer violations, and hit, kick, push all needed just some more clarification based on feedback we had received. We also added the level 2 code for stealing since the level 3 theft and larceny had been moved, and deleted cutting class just for pre-K through second because it's just not really relevant to pre-K or second. They're with us all day long. They can't leave if they want to.
I'm going to Burger King.
Yes, it's just not really an option.
I'm walking off campus.
And then we also deleted no returning form because for the most part, those are things parents need to send back, not things that a child would bring on their own, and loitering, because that seemed to go more with off limits for the younger grades. We also added in a escalation for level 1 offenses after the 6th occurrence, or at the 6th occurrence, it would actually move to a level 2 failure to comply for those things that they just keep on doing and haven't quite figured out yet.
And the slide you're going to see here is going to mirror a lot of what she just shared, but it's for the secondary schools, major changes. That left side section, banded codes, we have 8 banded codes. There are going to be 4 in the level 1 section, cutting activity in class, leaving class off limits, parking violation, driving violation, and failure to comply, detention violation. And then there's 4 that are going to be in the level 2 section. That's going to be alcohol, drug usage, and tobacco, bribery, forgery, and fraud. Hit, kick, push, bite, pinch, spit, and cutting school, leaving school. We did not ban anything in the level 3 area of the PDP. In the middle section, you're going to see definition changes that We did, again, with feedback from principals, assistant principals, teachers, and just many discussions at our meetings. We made adjustments to the definitions for those that are listed in the column. And the next section over, level adjustments per the state code. Again, we did drop profanity to student, which was a level 2. This previous PDP has been dropped to a level 1. Theft, larceny has gone from a level 2 up to a level 3, and that is part of a state code issue that we are aligning ourselves with. The last section you're going to see are the top parts added and deleted codes. We also deleted the no return form. Loitering was dropped. We're going to be using off limits in the secondary PDP. We did find a state code that we added for violation of medication policy, and ultimately we found that there was some confliction with students that were found with over-the-counter medications that was originally under drug possession. That's a level 3 offense, and we believe that there was some intervention that needed to take place in educating using the school nurse and having the students utilize the proper medication forms and policies. And so the state does have that approved code. And then down towards the bottom, you see adjusted consequence progressions. And those are going to be on the PDP, and they're going to be marked in red. And then we did create, as the elementary did, an escalation of level 1 offenses that will jump to a level 2 offense for refusal to obey.
On the violation of medication policy, yeah, it's not level 1 to have I'm just want to make sure that we're clear on medication is not prescribed to the kids.
That's drug possession.
So that's
I was going to say, so I just
drug
want to make sure we're not taking that and putting it down here. This is, and
So that came about, we had kids like that, they had, females law had like a leave in their female package. Technically, they're
yeah, how
supposed to go
uncomfortable
through
was
those.
that? Someone else said you were
He went down there and he was like, oh my gosh.
So we're talking about what we believe to be non-addictive over the counter. Okay. Thank you. Michael,
You're saying those are allowable?
Those are not allowable, but in the
They're
current
not
PDP,
drug
they're
possession
considered drug possession, and it's a level 3 offense. So which was, those kids will have to go in front of constituent board. So now we just added violation policy. So we still have to go through the proper channels, but it's not a level 3 offense.
And it's only, I'm sorry.
So if you're in middle school, you can't, and you're a girl in your little female packet, you can't take you can't have a leave in your pocketbook?
You shouldn't.
What if you're in high
No.
school? No, really? You have to go to the nurse to get it?
Yeah.
Correct.
So
Sorry, Ed.
and I'm not a female by any means.
No,
This is
you
just
can't.
not a conversation.
Just
we
can't
wanna continue.
So if there's not a form on file, is what you're saying, so you deleted
That's
the
good.
no return form
Chris, you can't.
violation, you deleted that portion of it. So there's not a form on file, and they have female has an Aleve or a Tylenol of some sort, that will be considered an offense.
Correct.
Yeah, currently it is. Currently they're required to have a medical form to have any medicine in their possession. All medicine has to come through the nurses department, including those over-the-counter medicines.
They can see it.
And that's just enforcing a policy, that the medication policy isn't one that we wrote, it's just, we have to enforce that policy.
We gotta fix it up.
So at what point now I'm going,
And that's boys and girls are allowed to have.
Well, and this is including allergy medications.
I was getting ready to say, we're getting into
It's not only female
some
related.
ingredients that,
Correct.
that's what I'm worried about. We've got to make sure we understand the ingredients that is in some of these over-the-counters.
okay.
Okay.
Yes.
I think you guys going through the PDP and reassessing and probably redefining and cleaning up a lot of the stuff I think is really good because it needs to be clarified. But my question is more along the lines of do you believe that the progressive discipline plan as written and if you had to follow the debate the way it's written, if you're a school leader and you had to follow it the way it's written, would it help you create a better school climate? Because I'm finding it a little difficult that you might have 6 chances to do something, or 5 chances to do something, and that helps create a better school climate. I understand we want to give children an opportunity to be in class, because if they're not in class, they can't learn, and if they're not in class, we can't teach them, we can't educate them, I understand that. But obviously, there's been some pushback against the ability for children to constantly, and some people would say, constantly misbehave or break rules that are policy in our district and be able to still be in class. So for those of you who are on this committee, do you see this plan as written? If you had to implement it as a school administrator, is this plan good to create school culture and school climate?
Something I want to chime in, there's a teacher-managed level that we didn't explicitly discuss, and so we did tease out, there's really 4 levels in the PDP, and the teacher-managed piece truly is a way to educate young people on the appropriate behaviors. It's a lot of really minor behaviors that you may be referencing, something about their paper or something that could be disrupting class that's not a disrespect, and that's something that we've really spent a lot of time as a committee trying to tease out. What is disrespectful behavior? What is versus just disrupting class? And so it does, as an administrator of a school, I do have to take the document and I do have to go back and have some courageous conversations with teachers to say, this is really not a level 2 offense. This isn't a refusal to obey. Let's really look at what took place. I do believe with the appropriate education of this to the staff, this absolutely can create a more positive culture for students. Now, it is hard because Ms. Coker and I had a discussion about this. We're talking about restorative justice practices across the country. That's something we want to try to have. Restorative justice practices isn't an absence of consequence, and that's something that we talked about. So it is definitely weighing on us as committee members, trying to make sure that we're finding a way to create a positive school culture.
And I think that we can't just look at the PDP in isolation. So when we look at a school, we're talking about positive climate, we're talking about MTSS teams working, deliberately planning and working to help students. We're talking about PBIS. We're talking about positive culture, positive language that's used throughout the school. So it cannot be just the PDP and that's it. You have to discipline is to teach. And so when we discipline, we teach, we reteach, we learn, we teach students what it means to be respectful, what it means to not be respectful. That can include role modeling, that can include peer shadowing, that can include a peer teaching a student how to be respectful or not, when we shouldn't use profanity. So I don't think we can use it in isolation. I mean, as a former principal, I didn't have this PDP, but we had a PDP because at the time we were able to create our own. And I'm not saying it was the best, because it probably wasn't in hindsight, but at least we also had the PDP coupled with our PBIS culture and everything else that went with a positive school culture. So I want to make sure that I feel like as a committee, we want this to be done in tandem with other aspects of positive school culture. But I hear you about the 6 times, but if you look at the PDP, it also talks about reteaching. Each time, especially in our elementary PDPs, it talks about what it means so students know when I should, when to behave like this and when to, at Morningside, we would call it code switching and middle class norms. And maybe that was acceptable at your home, but when you get to the door at Morningside Middle School, this is what we expect you to do. So I think that's how I perceive it as an administrator and a person that's on the team.
Because I think, the discipline plans obviously have to be in place, and I've had this conversation, I think we should maybe some other folk about. I wasn't so certain that I think we needed a universal PDP across the district. I think the issue is making sure that every single principal follows the PDP plan as it's written. And I don't know if you can really mandate that. I don't know if there's any way this team or we can make sure that in every single scenario that the principal, if they're dealing with the student, let's say, who has a weapon on campus, that they will follow this to the letter. And obviously there are different levels of offenses. And so let's say if it's a weapon, when that weapon is found on a student, does the PDP identify that once it's found, the SRO gets involved, of office calls, there's a police, and somebody gets arrested, there's a police report. And so how do you make sure, I don't know if this is what I'm saying, so how do we make sure that every single principal is following this to the letter so that there is equity across the district as it comes to punishment, regardless of what school you attend, where you live, income of family, so on and so forth?
So that's obviously intent is consistency across schools. And I would never sit here and say that we could ensure that on every single referral written, because I think we're over 60,000 referrals probably at this point in time, from lowest to highest number, and that's not. But we are, if you remember, each time I've been before you, we've talked about in the past, we didn't even have a system to do referrals in that was the same. So we now have everybody using the same system for referrals, so at least we have record keeping. But in that, we still have some schools that aren't using that system. So we're really working school by school to make sure administrators understand and follow and use the tools we've given them. We do monitor monthly for fidelity. We sample a few referrals from every school in our office. It's really time intensive because we have to look and we send that information back to the schools to process themselves and kind of see, hey, you know, you had 80% of your referrals we reviewed were followed the PDP. So we have been doing that communication this school year. I think it's improving, but obviously sometimes the cases that we look at, it wasn't followed, and so the child did linger. And so that's what we're working on. We're actually doing, I'm going to let Kayla do the next steps with it because it does address a couple of those.
So you heard about the PDP and how we've been working really since since January 2016 as a team. And so with that being said, we actually have to now figure out the rollout. We want to be strategic in our rollout. We want to roll out with fidelity because, as Mr. Miller pointed out, we want to make sure our schools are implementing the PDP with fidelity. So we do have some trainings. We plan to create a discipline procedures handbook, a manual for school administrators. So what it looks like if you see a student who leaves campus, what happens at school A, B, and Z. We want to publish the PDP for all staff. We have a training set up. Ms. Coakley is working on a training for us to all work on, and she started it. Training for administrators, so the administrators can roll out the PDP to the staff, because as you know, we're actually rolling out for all staff in the community. We plan to review data to make sure that schools that need targeted support, when we look at those monthly reports, we can see trends sometimes. So maybe a school needs more support on groups. How do I develop groups at my school level? What can I do to help students not reach that third or fourth occurrence? The project team that we have, the two project teams that we have will continue to meet monthly to develop surveys, analyze data, and discuss the PDP. So we have a lot of work to do, but it's been great, purposeful work, and I think that it's going to be beneficial to all of our students.
Thank you so much for all your work, too. And now questions.
One question I have is,
Cindy, Chris,
you're absolutely right. What's on that slide is exactly what you can do, which is look for trends, try to provide support, overcome the obstacles that are stopping the fidelity of action. But on this side of the table, Dr. Postaway, when does this become an executionary mandate? When does not consistently not having these processes used become your side of the table, which is not training and setup, but accountability for not doing the job the schools and staff are to do?
Do you want to answer it?
No, I was just going to toss it back to you.
Okay, well, I would really like for Jennifer to describe what we did last Wednesday at a high level. We talked about, we were trying to get at that. Like, we had a retreat that we took the Learning Services core leadership team off site, and we had this very kind of conversation. What are the expectations? What do we expect?
What happens? What I want to know is what happens when you don't meet them.
So we'll talk about that just a
absolutely.
bit.
So number one, that's why we're developing the manual, because we don't have one currently, and so that's step one, is making sure expectations are known. And then we've been asked to provide feedback to the level directors, good things that we're seeing in schools, as well as areas that we would like to see growth. And so that in our meeting, we were talking about how that might look and how that might work next year. We're creating some forms for communication so that they have that information from various departments, not just my department, in writing of areas of improvement. And then my team also meets quarterly with the executive directors of the schools, and we go over MTSS, PBIS, and this information with them. We started that in the third and fourth quarter this year, to see how that would go, and that was really beneficial. So multiple from my staff meet with the executive directors to provide that feedback. But we are working on that very process, because then that feedback to those executive directors, and myself included, because I have schools, would go into their evaluation at the end of the year.
Thank you. Reverend Collins.
I want to ask you about the profanity offense. So I'm put out on one vote, profanity, to teach a teacher, disrespect the teacher, or refuse to obey teacher. Are those now in the category 1?
No, sir.
What are they?
Profanity towards adult, refusal to obey, and those two are in level 2. It was the profanity towards student.
Another student?
Correct, yes, sir. That one was dropped per the state code down to level 1.
So what level 2 is suspension? What's level 2 penalty?
First offense in profanity towards adult is either 3 to 5 days focus if the school has focus, or 1 to 3 days out of school suspension.
High school.
I'm sorry, that's in the secondary PDP.
For the elementary, is temporary removal from the class, referral to the counselor, loss of privileges, and parent contact.
Parent contact. Okay. So maybe on the elementary one, maybe you can do mandatory parent conference.
So on the second offense, we do
No,
have the
on the first offense.
First offense, your suggestion
Oh,
is?
yeah, the mandatory parent conference. That's because at a young age, these kids start doing this, and the parents allow them to continue doing it. But it'll be a major problem in middle and high school. And they may not even make it through if they don't learn it at a young age. But I've been to some of the high schools, and I've seen teachers tell students, put this away, put your cell phone away, stop eating in class, stop spending a lot of time talking back and forth to the same handful of students. So I said to myself, why aren't the children afraid of the discipline? Why is the teacher why she's allowing this in the classroom to begin with? So in that area, in the high school level, I wanted to be strict. That when you've been warned to be quiet or to sit still, to stop doing it, stop interrupting the class, or you curse your teacher. I wanted to affect the parent. That in other words, the punishment is attached to the parent that they have to respond. Because taxpayers can't pay teachers to teach a class and babysit the student at the same time. We just can't do that. So I want the parent to be accountable for the behavior.
So are you requesting that we change this?
So when the parent is accountable
Is he making a motion to change?
to the behavior, something's going to happen, especially in a lot of these young boys that are getting in so much trouble because they feel like they can get by with it, and mother goes to work, come home, they're out of school, and there may not be punishment enough at the house. But if I got to disturb you from your job, or you got to come in and look at my face and talk to me for a half hour, if I'm going to inconvenience you, you're going to make some changes at home. You're going to be tired of coming to school. So I want the parent to be, I want somewhere the parent bear the burden of making these students behave, that's your job, make your child behave in school, and not the teacher's job. They have to follow instructions, and I don't know how you can tie it in, but I'd like to see that tied in some kind of way, where it's a mandatory conference, or a representative family got to come in. It could even be a pastor got to come in, but somebody got to come represent that child when they get out of control, when they're not obeying, not listening, refusing to obey, cursing, disruptive, walking out of class, all these things type of school.
So are you asking that they change the progressive? I'm trying to figure out if we need to take action on what you're saying, or if we just all walk out of the room and nothing.
He's giving them his perspective on what he's saying.
No, he's saying, I want this consequence to happen. I'm wondering if we want to turn that into a board motion.
Can we let staff?
I don't think so.
What I want them to do, I want them to go back and put something in writing and present it to us before the next meeting, if you can, and then let us see it.
Why don't we let them
That becomes
answer?
board action. We have to decide that, not one board member.
Stop. Let the staff answer Reverend Collins' question.
You see?
Go ahead.
If I can address that, I think we do have a lot of these things, especially at the high school level, addressed in it. It may not be the exact terminology that we use. So if you look at the high school PDP, we have conditional suspensions, and the conditional suspension, the majority of them are mandated parents' meetings.
Yeah, suspensions are. But I mean, the suspension, what I'm saying is when the student becomes to the point of disruptive.
So Chris was saying before they get to that.
Yeah, but when it's disruptive, then the parent need to be involved.
Yeah, we're not talking about regular suspension. We're talking about a conditional suspension. So the condition is you have to bring your mom back to school tomorrow, or you will be suspended for the day. So,
Yeah,
so that's the
yeah.
mandatory meeting. So if you look at it, a lot of those, the second,
at least within 3 days.
at least the second offense, most of them have conditional suspension.
Yeah, at least within
So
at least within a couple of days,
yeah,
somebody got to come represent that child, and have a talk with that child in prison.
We have to be
Thank you,
careful
Mr.
about who
Hollingshed.
Can I just make
Go
a
ahead.
point? We have to be careful about who can come to the school and discuss discipline.
Yes.
So it can't be a pastor, it really can't be a relative, it has to be a parent, or it has to be a guardian,
Well,
or someone.
immediate family member. In other words, someone connected to that child.
No,
She
it
knows
has
the
to
rules.
be, it has to be someone that they've identified on their emergency card.
But
as
the
person
parent is
who's
identified.
responsible
Okay.
for that child. And the
But
other
that's fair.
piece of that is that we also have to understand that that may be our wish, but we still have parents who will not.
Yeah.
So when does this child get?
Children can't make their parents do anything.
Right, I mean, if a parent refuses to come, and what is our next step is a lot of times what schools are dealing with. and
Well,
our
but
schools
that's
are
the point. If the
speaking more.
parent can't do it, then the child is suspended till the parent can't go.
Well, we can't
You
suspend
can't
kids
do that.
indefinitely.
We're eliminate, because I was in a high school
Well,
this
you
year
can
where
put
a
another
parent
program.
refused to come. And we're denying a child an education because the parent refused to come, and I don't think that's right either.
Well, then you got to or another program, alternative program until that parent comes. It'll be placed somewhere, but not put back in that
Okay.
classroom to tear it up again.
Can we, Kevin, Mr. Hollingshed.
Kind of lost track of where all this going on. In the early ages, like 3rd grade, 4th grade, and discipline, things become learned behavior. I think what happens now is that you're dealing with children that have a lot going on at home. So I think the teacher, one, needs to learn, I guess, to restore justice practice, but a better understanding of identifying social issues in her classroom that pertains to that child. Sometimes it may not need to be a discipline action if the child is going through something traumatic at home. I didn't talk when you talked. Now let me finish.
I'm agreeing, that's all.
I know. Thank you, Chris. But we have. I can just identify what's in my area. You have some kids from multiple family homes, as I just explained this weekend to a group. And you have kids sometimes with different parents, and they are frustrated about their home environment, and then they come to school and they act out in school. So the teacher, she's not equipped or prepared to deal with that. She then intends may usher out discipline when it doesn't need to be. So my question is to you is, what will you be doing to identify, that kind of situation, or is that in your study of your discipline plan?
And I think that goes back to what Kayla was saying. We can't look just at the PDP for the change behavior, but we got to look at our school-wide systems, and so we have things in place like our social emotional learning, our MTS, PBIS, school culture type things, and more specifically, individual problem solving for some of those kids. So a lot of times we identify those issues when we're doing those problem solving. Sometimes it comes directly to us from a specific behavior, and sometimes it's just us in general looking at data that we see those problems. I think we address it in our kind of multi-tiered supports across the school, and not just through the PDP.
Yes, sir.
And from the very, it was a long time ago, but at the very beginning, administrators do have the option, if there is some extenuating circumstance going on, to not do exactly what's listed in the progressive discipline plan. They could do something less or something different if there is something traumatic or something with a student that would warrant that.
Have you looked at, and I think this is what Chris was getting at earlier, have you looked at the infractions in the past and broken them down into categories like in district? I know I've seen that, but more in detail, like what the infractions are?
like the volume of what infractions we
Yeah,
see
she
the most.
spoke about that
Yeah.
earlier.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
Yeah, I was out.
the number one
It's in
infraction
here.
in high schools is tardy
I was out.
by
had an emergency.
thousands.
And excuse.
Just late to class is the number one behavior, right?
Attendance,
In high school?
attendance related issues. Our
Yeah.
number one is tardies and then, cutting class. So
Cutting class.
attendance related issues.
Well, if they're cutting class,
I got one question on that.
let me just finish that. Now.
Yeah.
If cutting class, then what basically drives that, and what is the student's response, or what have you found in that study?
A lot of it is academics. So they're
Not
either
understanding.
they're avoiding the class because they're already failing, or they're avoiding the class because the work is difficult. And so a lot of things that we're doing is to try to address that.
So
So
in
what are
that-
we doing to address that void?
So when each school looks at their data, because that's the district data, I know what the district data looks like, but so Wanda, I know that's their data, cutting class. That's what their PBIS team, their positive behavior team, should be looking at their school trends to determine, like he just said, he knows what their two reasons are, and then they create a plan to address at the school level, because it's different. It might be different at Wanda than it is at, North Charleston
Yes,
High
ma'am.
or Meminger Elementary. There might have different codes, might be the highest. And so that's where that team at the school comes in to plan for the school. So we
Okay.
provide, we provide a framework, but the work has to be done individually at the schools, and we can support them in that as well with our coaches.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Chris and Chris.
Cindy?
So, this is the third year you've done this, Jennifer?
Oh,
This is the third, so, and I really appreciate how
It was about cutting
you
class.
refine it each time and add and subtract and update, and I really appreciate how you use this team. So I don't want you to go back and write a proposal to change anything in this. I want you to implement your next steps as you said you would, and then just send it to us. But I don't want y'all to go back and write any proposals for changes and bring it back.
Okay.
So you're instructing the staff what to do?
Both of y'all are asking.
Both of y'all asking for Einstein.
Okay.
So, can I ask a
Both of y'all
question?
asking.
All right, I'm hosting this thing for the first time.
Strauss had a question.
All right, about cutting class, and this one just, as a parent, I've noticed it. When kids go to take their AP test, do academic competitions, do other things, as a parent, you get that damn call that says, you need to write a letter to tell why your kid. Well, how come the teachers don't know, or the principal doesn't know your kid is out there representing the school? Why do you have to do that every time? That's probably all these thousands of cutting classes. They're not cutting class, they're actually doing something for the school.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's a pain as a parent.
Just because you get that attendance phone call, because that's generated on Power School attendance.
Yes.
And so a teacher can't put attendance on a child that's not in their class. So it does show up. Those are not necessarily referrals. We don't see.
All right, I get
Those usually, I understand. Those
Yeah.
usually get cleared up as the day attendance is cleared up.
Okay, as a parent, it makes you very frustrated. You're like,
I
my
got
kid's
one too.
representing the school, and I
Well,
and
at
I
least they know that they know your kid is there.
That
isn't
call
there.
doesn't generate a referral.
Well, that's
If that-
good.
Just so you know that those two things aren't mirrored together.
Okay, are there any more questions?
I just wanted to thank everyone for the lively input. We always have spirited discussion every single time this topic comes up. I'd like to thank the team
Thank
for
you so
serving.
much for your
Thank
work.
you.
And
It's
remind the
amazing.
board that the board doesn't vote on the PDP. For very good and obvious reasons, you ask the practitioners to develop and maintain and refine the PDP. So we listen very intently to feedback from teachers and principals. The one issue that didn't come up today that we are going to form a very small committee of probably 3 teachers and 3 parents to look at is the use of cell phones. We have a divergent point of view. Teachers want them out of the class. They feel as though they're terribly disruptive. And we have some parents who feel very strongly that they want their children to have cell phones in case of an emergency. So, they're gonna work, a small committee's gonna work on that and bring their recommendations, send their recommendations to the PDP.
Do you have a question, or is it time?
Yep, so we're an hour and a half behind schedule, so we're set. Dr. Postwood.
Dr. Postwood, you get real 5 minutes.
I don't need 5 minutes.
We're an hour and a half behind schedule.
Thank you.
Because the principal has.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Right.
Okay.
So my item is about school choice, and I just want to tell the board that I think we would all agree it's time to revisit school choice in a large way.
Yes.
So we will have 2 or 3 staff members doing they've already begun. They'll be doing some research on when we started choice, why we started choice, what we were trying to accomplish, where we are now with choice. So as you look at sort of the bullets, I'd like to just review them with you. We'll bring something back to the board when we're ready for your input. We're not ready for others to help us yet.
Right.
But we want to help you clarify in 2018 the goals and purposes that you hold, the values you hold around school choice. And then we're going to take some guesses about what those are, and the report we bring to you will suggest to you the extent to which we think we are or are not meeting those goals, the perhaps unanticipated or unforeseen unintended consequences of school choice. We'll look at the impact on neighborhood schools, and then we've outlined some of the questions that we will ask this small group to complete. We anticipate having our first report ready for the board in late July or early August. Our timeline will be for the board to take action by October, which is required in order to make changes for 2019-20 school year. So when we say school choice, we mean all facets of school choice. Magnets, partial magnets, charters, who's in buildings, who's not, constituent magnets, and student transfers are a form of choice. So we're going to ask the team to look at everything and bring our findings to you, and then we'll get your direction on how to move forward and how to involve the community, because this is a matter that's on many people's minds. So
Thank you.
that's it.
I have just a question regarding that.
What?
On the so this year here we're now, we did the two students per school for the like academic magnet. The proposal, the two.
The top two, first and second.
Top two.
Yeah, I don't know if you get us an updated number. How did that fan out? Did you get some results? And
We'll be glad to, another board member asked for those data recently, so we'll be glad to give you an update in this week's update.
I like it when it comes. I like the notes, because sometimes there's a lot of stuff in the update and I might overlook it.
Okay.
Can you sit it by yourself?
No, sir, we try to do just a one page. The summary page says, here's what's here, and you can watch for it. It should come on Thursdays, and if we're incomplete or unable to deliver it on Thursday, we'll let you know. And if you'll email me separately, I'll try to send it, whatever you want to make sure you get it.
Okay, we're on to thank you. We're on to principal presentations.
I'm going to ask the elementary, middle, and high school teams to come on up, and when it's their turn, I'll ask that they introduce their the leader that you have with you. So, Ms. Berry, you're up first.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
If there's room for everybody to pull up to the table, I think we're only going to share short, and there's room over by Ms. Ambrose.
There's some room here.
Thank you.
You assume you're gonna kiss the time? You assume you're gonna kiss the time?
All right.
The lips.
All righty.
Good afternoon. Minnie Hughes Elementary. Minnie Hughes Elementary is a school that is committed to educate all. Students are committed to learn, and parents are committed to support. I bring to you a brief presentation to the board and to our superintendent. Our enrollment fluctuates from year to year. We kind of average about 210 and 17 and 18. We were at a low of 195 students. Our poverty index is 95% based on our 17 and 18 dashboard. And we have a population of 90.2% African American, 6.2 Hispanic, 3.1 white, and others 0.5%. Our continuous improvement cycle. Our plan at Minnie Hughes is to analyze needs within the data to support individual growth, MAP and SC ready with leadership teams. Our plan is also to implement project-based learning in grades 3 through 5 using STEM. Our plan at Many Hughes is to organize and display data and share with the stakeholders at faculty and PTA meetings. Our plan is to collaborate, our continuous collaboration with Baptist Hill Middle High to increase student participation in our RISE program in the fall of 2018. What do we do at Many Hughes? We are developing currently our playbooks and our playlists that are personalized to the math continuum. We have visited schools like ours that have shown gains in SC Ready. Our due is to utilize PLC meetings to do data digs and student individualized growth plans. Our other due at Many Hughes is to offer personal development based on identified problems of practice and structure in PBIS and project-based learning. Many Hughes, we are studying our progress monitoring, our Ames web, we have Burst, we have digital content reports, our writing samples. At Many Hughes, we study and conduct data team conferences to improve our individual student growth. Our action, we grow student learners to improve the educational outcomes. Our action at Many Hughes is to adjust or discontinue low to no gain practices, and our act is to align our strategic plan with our Title I plan, which we have done this year. Let's take a look at the data analysis and finding our comparative data. We took 2 schools in our district data. This is our growth, 1 year growth. CCSD at 56.2 in year 2017. Stone Oak Park's growth, 49.5%. Meeting Street at 52.2%, and Many Hughes at 65.2%. We took our math year growth from last year, that is also on our dashboard. CCSD at 53.1%, Stone Oak Park at 51.2%, Meeting Street at 77.2%, and Many Hughes at 50.7%. And we did decline by 1% in math, and we increased in reading in 2017. All right, other part of our data analysis of math growth. If you will look, I went back to fall 15 and 16 of the spring, and we were at 52.1% in math growth by a year. And then I took also the fall 16, 17, we were at 65.2%. And as of now, based on our fall to winter, right now we could meet our growth target again, and we are right now in reading at 60.8%. And right now we have increased 8.7 percentile gain points. And then in math, in that fall 15 to spring, we were at 50.2%. And then moving forward, last year we were at 50.7%. And right now, from fall to winter, we're at 51.5%. It was very interesting to see these trend lines when we had a principals meeting, and I just wanted to go over this because sometimes we don't understand poverty. We don't want to say it, but there are some trickle effects in there that affect learning. And if you can take a minute and look, we are over the district line. Even though that number for meets and exceeds is only 17.6, but that's where we are. We are over that trend line. We are next to the state line. And I did scatter out schools and try to find schools like ours. And our team, a couple of our teachers, I took them to Mount Zion because they did better on their SE Ready. And I wanted them to talk to those teachers, and I talked to Ms. Fordham and to explain what were some things that they were doing that we can work. And they were doing more towards their culture and PBIS. When we talked about our playbooks, we learned about playbooks and playlists a little bit more. We went to East Iredale Elementary, a very diverse school in North Carolina, and we brought that back. And we're going to be ready to use those playlists with our continuum to make sure our kids grow. Because we don't want to see that. We don't want to see that. But that's what poverty says. That we are over those trend lines in the district, but we still can improve. And math is our strength. You wouldn't think it when we talk about math in the district, but math is Minnie Hughes' strength. We did better in math than we did in reading, and we're at 24.2 based on meets and exceeds. That's math. Math is on the right-hand side, and we're over the district, still next to the state trend line. SMART goals. SMART goals are specific, they're achievable, and they're relevant, and they're time specific. So when we look at some goals that my team came up with, and I talked to a couple of people, I want to make an impact, but we still have to look at some things. So to ensure this will happen, we want to ensure that at least 50% of students at Minnie Hughes who scored continue to score in the 41st and 91st percentile in reading and math. And we want this to make this continuous year to year. And we want to do this at the beginning and to the end by 2019. And this is math. And we want to increase the number of students scoring meets and exceeds. We know that's very important, and we look at that. If they would combine our approach scores, we would look way better, because that data looks way better when they combine approach, meets, and needs. So it will be low. It is at 17.6, and we want to get this year to 27.6 in reading or more. We also want to increase the number of students scoring meets or exceeds in SC Ready Math at 24.2 to 34.2. We want to ensure our teachers are very equipped with and able to analyze their data, provide appropriate research-based initiatives based on specific skill deficits, while placing and emphasizing an increase in effectiveness, differentiation of the core instruction through strategic professional development and training. And that's what we've been really working hard on, to ensure that teachers are equipped with what they need, but they also have to talk to other teachers to make sure they're doing some things and with support. We want to ensure that our parents are informed of student data and the plan in place to increase achievement, increase parent involvement each year. Moving forward, math, reading, writing, and discipline. I just heard you finish about discipline. In order to have achievement, you have to have the discipline. So we provide an array of PBIS support and development in our school culture. And you can see it at many schools. Most kids are happy when they come to school. They want to be at school. Good morning, Miss Berry. Good morning. Yes, we say those things still at Minnie Hughes. We want to hire and collaborate with school-based mental health, just like you talked about today. We want to implement school-wide norms and procedures across our grade levels. And we know there's some things that we're going to work on next year to ensure that. We want to review behavior strategies that support the needs of our students. Then moving on to math and reading, we utilize adaptive digital content. Most of it, we like Khan. We are a Khan school, Khan Academy. And content to differentiate groups based on the MAP continuum. Our MAP continuum has become a very important tool at our school. We want to design the playbooks in order to have the play sheets, just like they do in the NFL games on Sunday, to support the students and individual needs and growth. We want to integrate mentoring minds as a supplement tool for math and improvement in grades 1 through 5. We want to provide strategies for professional development and content specialists and consultants. Moving on to reading, utilizing also again the adaptive technology to support phonics and phonemic awareness for our Tier 1 and Tier students, and we also use bursts for Tier 3 students. To provide coaching teams, teaching with reading coaches, and target informational text and vocabulary, and we use that by using our supplement material, Mentoring Mind and Read Works, another digital content. Design the playbooks and sheets for individualized growth with the red, the yellow, the green, and the blue. So those play sheets look like where the students are at. If they're on red, they have like a pink play sheet. If they're on green, they have a green. If they're on blue, they have a blue play sheet, and they work on their individualized learning at that time. writing, continue to look at the samples and utilize question stems to improve. And we usually try to get some of those through the New York Times, the Learning Network, reading prompts, and utilize digital content for writing prompts. The progress monitoring tools that we use at Many Hughes at this time. We use MAP, of course, Measures of Academic Progress, Ames Web, BURST for our Tier 3 students, and we just received BURST about a month ago, and we sit down and we train so we can catch some things that we may not have caught. We use our digital content, our DRA2, and my IGDs in the younger grades. It is important to have a leadership team that meets. We meet every Monday now. We started that in January to ensure that through our PLCs, my leaders will go out and make sure everything is aligned. And then in MTSS meetings, PLC team meetings, individual data conferences between students and teachers, and then parent data conferences. At the end, it's not up there, but I added this. It is not how we started the commitment at Many Hughes, but it will be how we evolve at the end of each school year in spite of the disparities that you may see in the poverty index. Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Could you introduce your teacher leader?
Yes, that is Mr. Brooks. He is like my right hand. He is my he is our parent advocate at Many Hughes.
Okay.
Yes, so he is on my leadership team, and we went over this today in our leadership team. I never try to hide any secrets from them. They knew I was working on something, and we talked about it today along with an article about equity in schools, and that's how we got to this today.
Thank you very much. That's great information.
Thank you.
You ready? Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to be here today to talk about Thomas C. Carey Middle School. My name is Sharon Randall. I'm finishing the 5th year as principal. I have with me my right-hand person, Sheila Osborne, who is Carrio's reading coach. There's nothing that we talk about here that she hasn't been directly involved in creating, doing, so I'm very happy to have her here today. How do we work on continuous improvement? Carrio has about 1,195 students. We have students who achieve at very high levels. We have the whole gamut of ability levels. But our problem over the past few years is figuring out how to push the biggest group we have, which is the the students who achieve at higher levels. Our growth tended to be flat compared to schools like ours. So we really dug into that this year. So our planning was figuring out exactly how to move our students. And part of that was really pulling apart MAP and the strand data. Part of it was reaching out to NWEA and having them consult with us specifically to try to figure out what to do for that upper end of students, and also to reach out with the district's help to a school like ours in Virginia, Trailside Middle School, and see what they were doing to move their students. They have the same number of students we do and are having great results. So we took all that information, we made some specific plans of what to implement this year, and a big part of it is teacher training. The second part would be having students take ownership of their learning, which is a big part of the South Carolina Profile of the Graduate. But teachers work with kids this year to have them develop short and long-term goals for meeting growth targets in the classroom, as well as with math and state testing. The Carrio became part of the district's personalized learning initiative this year. We're very excited to be part of that. We feel like it continues what we were already discussing when it came to differentiation, student engagement, and rigor. With that initiative, we had access to Kendra Murphy from the Ed Tech department, as well as Ed Elements, and both of those groups were very valuable to us this year in teaching our teachers about what it really means to differentiate. Sometimes they talk a good game, but how do you take a class of 30 and 35 and really drill down and impact instruction based on a student's actual working level? So we worked on that this year. We implemented some specific strategies. Of course, we're going to monitor and adjust as needed. And based on the results, and we had some really good results this year, we're going to continue building on our gains this year. So let's look at some of the data points on the next page. The 2-year trend in South Carolina Ready, that's the state test that we actually started again today. The results don't come back until October and November. So you're looking at 16 and 17 data there. We did see a drop last spring in ELA, over 11 points. However, we grew in math almost 2 points, which is wonderful achievement there. Comparative data, as far as the South Carolina school report card, or state report card rather, we are not compared against Lang and Moultrie, even though there are sister schools in District 2, because of our poverty index. It's lower than Lang and Moultrie. No. But we always have friendly competitions with those 2 schools, so they're included here. You see that we're neck and neck with Lang for South Carolina Ready and ELA. Moultrie was ahead of us a little bit. But I'd love to show, and I've highlighted in green, that we're well ahead in math. Even though Lang always gets those national STEM awards, we're still beating them in math. And we hope to continue that trend. I've also included who is on our schools like ours, one of those schools. And I chose Chapin Middle because they were just selected as Palmetto's finest middle school winner this year at the state level. And as you can see, they're beating us in ELA, but we're beating them in math. The next page shows multi-year MAP growth trends. How many of our kids are meeting that 1-year NWEA MAP growth target? I've included 16, 17, and 18 preliminary spring growth data, and you see that for every year we're making improvements in both reading and math. I also broke out one of our subgroups as far as state accountability, and that's African American versus white. And I did this to show that we have actually closed that achievement gap between African American and white in reading, but we are a ways off in math, and we continue to struggle with that, and that is going to be one of our primary goals next year, to close that particular achievement gap that you see has been plaguing us for the past 3 years. So we're going to get serious to try to close that particular area for the coming year. Going on to the next page, just some comparative data with Lang and Moultrie again. This is for MAP 1-year growth targets. And if you'll notice in parentheses, that's what we have for this year. So some big gains for us from 1 year to the next for that 1 year's growth of our students. We're very proud of that. But just looking at 2017 data, we were ahead of Lang and Moultrie for reading, but behind Lang and Moultrie for math, 1 year's growth. Going on to the next page to talk about our SMART goals. We have, as I said earlier, kids achieving at very high levels. I don't care what class our kids are in, we want the expectations to be very rigorous. So at minimum, our kids should be meeting a 70% success target, whether it's 1 year's growth in reading and math MAP, or meets and exceeds in ELA and math. So those were our goals this year. We sifted it down to those primary goals, and that's driven everything that we are doing in the classroom this year. As far as discipline, we did have a disparity between special education students and other students, so we are working to reduce that for this year as well. We hope by the end of the year that we'll see more than a 3% improvement in that area. As Ms. Berry said a second ago, we don't have any secrets at Curio, so we're sharing this data with our School Improvement Council, PTSO, asking for their input in various ways. Of course, our PTSO is offering some wonderful incentives for teachers and students to meet those short and long-term goals. Okay, what are our Curio's high-yield strategies this year? You see that we've broken it into 4 specific areas, and there's, of course, some overlap, but I want to talk about each one of these in a little bit more detail. Digital content, we, in a rare, unusual event for our Cario had 3 7th grade math teachers leave us last year. And the 3 math teachers that we brought on board didn't know the history of the area, and they jumped all over digital content when it was rolled out. Alex, Algebra Nation, iReady in some cases. And when the winter math scores came out this year, their scores were the highest in our building, which got the rest of our teachers, who are very competitive, on board to try to see what was going on. So that was a blessing in disguise to move us along with digital content and some other areas that I'll talk about. But part of the learning curve this year was just what is it and how do you implement it to be successful, for it to be a useful tool. And it was never our goal for it to replace the instruction in the class. It was an additional tool to fill in gaps and to push kids as hard as they could go. We do, some of the map strand data analysis was to help determine where to put kids on the digital content, and we've become quite successful. Mrs. Osborne has become quite successful with that this year. As I said earlier, we're a personalized learning school this year, and in our minds, this initiative continued our discussions with differentiation, with rigor, and with student engagement. So we are excited to be part of this. We're excited for the extra support that comes with that. And our teachers are having real conversations about what it means to differentiate. And we look forward to next year. When we talked to that school in Virginia, they said when they worked year 2 in personalized learning, they really began to see some real benefits of those discussions and trainings and the hard work that goes into it. So next year for us will be year 2, and we're looking forward to that. Tech Tuesdays. How do you get teachers to attend PD, take it seriously, and make real changes in the middle of an already stressful year? I have to tell you a little bit of history. At Cario, we implemented instructional rounds a couple of years ago where I hosted groups of teachers to go around and see each other in action, but we were looking for specific things. We were looking for engagement and rigor, how high students were working on Bloom's taxonomy at that time. And through that, we began to build trust between our teachers to collaborate with each other. So fast forward 2 years, and we implemented Tech Tuesdays to use our in-house talent for teachers to begin to learn from each other. So those teachers who were making off-the-charts gains in digital content, other teachers started to want to come and hear what they were doing and how they were implementing it. The same held true for personalized learning and differentiation and instructional models. But I basically required our teachers to attend these plannings or these PDs during their planning period once every 2 weeks. So at first, it did not go over well, but they quickly learned that they were learning tips and tricks to actually save them time in teaching and to be more successful. So we're definitely going to continue that initiative next year. I also had very specific learning targets for our teachers with personalized learning, learning what the 4 core was and how that fit into what they were already doing. And they also had to continue those peer observations and collaboration. Targeted instruction is our last category. We spent a lot of time this year getting kids to make short and long-term goals for their own learning, and they are really excited in meeting those targets, whether they're grades, math testing, growth goals, or we hope to see in the future the South Carolina Ready progress. But that's built off of our PBIS system, off of generally what we try to espouse as a school, which is capturing kids' hearts. Positivity is a choice, and service to others is something we strive to do. We specifically pulled groups of students for small group retesting 1 to 3 days a week during their related arts classes, and we pulled kids no matter where they were originally working. So they could have been making a 260, I'll just use that as an example, on MAP, but we were pulling them because they were weak in a particular area. Or they were at 199, and we pulled them in small groups if they were weak in a particular strand together. And we did very targeted instructions for 1 to 3 days, and we are seeing benefits, we think, in that area. We tasked all of our teachers to be supportive of teaching informational text and vocabulary strategies, whether they're in science class, social studies, or related arts, and we think that their support and collaboration with ELA and math teachers has been very useful for our school. How do we progress monitor? We, of course, look at any component of math, and we actually enjoy doing it fall, winter, and spring to see how we're progressing. We look at digital content reports, common assessments, and survey results if they're back in a timely manner. We're meeting all the time and discussing the results. And we, something else that I worked on to implement this year is meeting with teachers and show them a spreadsheet with their MAP scores so they can see their name attached to their CP or honors class growth goals. But they can also see how everybody else is working. I take everybody else's name off. But again, our teachers are very competitive, and we have seen remarkable growth this spring in teachers who want to be in that 70 or 80% growth targets. So I'm definitely going to continue those conferences. And our teacher-parent data conferences have been very useful. We were one of the pilots last year for doing it, and we enjoyed doing it again this year. Cario is a wonderful school. We continually look for ways to push our kids even harder. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Very much. Good work.
Dr. Larson.
Good afternoon, my name is Steve Larson. I'm at St. John's High School. I've been there for 1 year. I've been with the district a little over a year now. So I'm thrilled to share with you some of the work that we've been doing over the last year at St. John's. It's become very personal. If you know anything about St. John's, it really gets into you, and the commitment's going to go well beyond just raising student achievement. So we do a 2-time a year plan, do, study, act cycle. We figured that isn't working, and we know by January that it's not working. We need to go back into a study mode, so we do 2 cycles per year. We have a flat leadership structure when we are doing our planning. Our teachers belong to professional learning communities, but also everybody's welcome to be on my leadership team. I have 35 teachers, so we just all come one, come all, and we're going to talk about school achievement and what our plans are. Our School Improvement Council, our Title I, and our Parent Club, or PTSA, are all engaged with our planning. And we share all of our surveys based on our climate, how students are feeling, how parents are feeling with our staff. Our doing is about the work that we do every day. We have the weekly PLCs is how we check in on our teachers' progress toward implementing the strategies. Primarily, it's for us, it's not about the strategy, it's about the degree to which we implement it right, the fidelity and the consistency. So that touch point really helps us make sure that we're all going after the same outcomes. We study the data as it comes in. We've increased the amount of data that we're using, incorporating the math data and then our additional survey data so that we can evaluate how students are progressing. Particularly with the D and F list, we can look at students who are just not making progress, and we can circle back on them. And then our ACT is, we've got a very aggressive work plan for the next 5 years. However, we're not going to keep it the same. If it doesn't work, we're going to throw out practices that don't work and scale up practices that do. I'm going to show you a little bit of data so you can get a sense of what St. John's looks like. Our enrollment, you can see, is up. I like to say it's at an all-time high, but by 1. It's highest it's ever been. Use data to do whatever you want, but truly it's the highest it's been since 2010. So that's really good, and that number is a late in the year number, and typically the attrition happens in the end of the year. So I'm excited about that. 76.2% poverty. And our last graduation rate was 79.2%, up from 56%, which is horrifying. I think one of the things that we have said in the past, but will no longer say, is that our sample size is so low, and as a group of students drop out or fail, it really swings the data, but we need to be at least 80%, 85% graduation rate with a plan for the other 15%. You saw the, okay, we moved on, perfect. The end of course assessments, again, aren't where they need to be. I compared them with the schools that look similar based on poverty, and I ranked the poverty. So you can see that St. John's is a 60.2 in reading and a 66.7 in math. This year's isn't a lot better, and I'll go into why that is. And then our ACT composite score, again, that for comparison purposes, we might be looking like we're leading the pack, but at 16, 17, we need to have much bigger goals for achievement. The ACT scores, that's a real tough one to move over time because you start practicing that stuff in 5th grade. So, okay. One of these slides, this is one of the slides that I'm really proud of. We really pushed the rigor in our school, trying to get students to do as much dual credit as possible. We have a great partnership with Trident, and we have some great donors who are making it a possibility for our students to take as many online courses as possible through Trident. So you can see that we're at about 45 students actively participating in college coursework while they're completing their high school transcript. Work keys is going to be one of our main focuses next year, making sure that it's called a win now. But you can see that we've made progress on work keys, but still 50% isn't what we expect to see. So we've set some goals, some SMART goals here. We're going to increase the students graduating on time from 79 to 81.2. It's just 2 percentage points up. This year looks to be like a stronger graduating class, but right now my eyes are on our freshmen, making sure that we don't lose any of the 110 of them along the way. We're going to raise the percent of students by being very strategic about how we prepare for the ACT, how we make it a relevant assessment every single day, even as they start as freshmen. One of the cultural shifts that we have to have at our school is that it's cool to practice for the ACT, and we'll have after school and Saturday classes, and this is something that matters to you. So over time, we'll get that culture moved into place. Our end of course exams, I told you I'd talk a little bit about this. One of the challenges that we have is that we've begun to think about the pipeline and how we can influence earlier into the 8th grade, 7th grade, and so on. So we've started our vertical planning with Hot Gap so that we can identify who our kids are on a map that are in the 25th percentile or lower, because they won't pass the EOC in either area. So we're developing some early warning systems, boot camps, summertime things, and some carrots and sticks that you don't get to take a English 1 unless you qualify or have taken the boot camp over the summer. So we need our kids to really develop those skills. And of course, we'll use the adaptive digital content like that to accelerate. Finally, in math, our Algebra 1 scores are going to go up, I believe, but we have the same pipeline issue where our students just aren't ready to pass algebra, the EOC. One of the things we're doing there is we're, like most schools, splitting algebra into a full year course. Moving forward, so we, at our school, we identified a work plan that focuses on 3 very specific areas: raising academic achievement, increasing stakeholder engagement, and providing state-of-the-art programs. It's a bit of a chicken and egg for us. We need to significantly improve our enrollment. We can't do that until our student achievement goes up. We can't bring more students in and, by enticing additional programs without the students in place first. So our strategy is very comprehensive. That we've got to hit the plate that's spinning on academic achievement, get people really excited about being an Islander and coming back to their schools, and then having programs that are unprecedented. It's a high lift, but so what we've done this year is we implemented a freshman success program, focusing on getting kids to be ready for the EOC and not. We have a big problem with kids not passing English 1 and then they stay a freshman, and then the likelihood of their long-term success just goes down exponentially. We're using social-emotional learning strategies. We're an AVID school. We're going to really push school-wide AVID. We're a restorative practices school where students problem solve when there's an issue. We also use the PDP, but the most important part is, are you learning from the situation? And of course, we have a very strong PBIS program. Stakeholder engagement, we're making use of a lot of opportunities in Johns Island, Watanabe, where people want to help. So we moved from about 7 registered volunteers to about 70 registered volunteers this year, doing all sorts of things, helping out in algebra, from coming to Saturday school and hanging out with our students, and sometimes just taking on an intern. Our communication strategies, social media, we've got a constant contact newsletter that goes out. So between all that, we've got about 600 followers that check in on how we're doing at St. John's High School. And of course, our brand recognition is going to be all about what our students do. So I've got a cohort of about 150 students that desperately want to change the brand of St. John's High School. And so we're going to start mobilizing them so that they're out in the community and people get a sense, that's what it's about. My job in that is to bring in as many people as possible and do walkthroughs, check out the classrooms, and after we do that, they really are hooked. They're surprised. Our dual credit opportunities are going to expand. I would like to see that we have more on-site teachers for dual credit rather than just online programs. Our career and technical education, Rich has been phenomenal trying to bring the things that kids want to do and that align with career clusters so that we have an elaborate CTE program. It's not there yet. And then we've got a huge push. I have a teacher named Tanya McIntyre who goes out and specifically finds internships that will meet the interests of our students. And they take an early out and they're off working in real jobs in like Kiowa, motor companies, all throughout Charleston, Boeing. So that's really our strategies for this year. I don't see that any of those will change. We are going to have to double down on our freshman academy program. It didn't work the way we intended to. Okay, like I said, we are using the map now. We've done it for all of our freshmen so we can compare their progress. If we're going to monitor how they did in our middle school, we better monitor how they do in our school. So we've done all of our freshmen, and then next year they'll get it as sophomores as well, so we'll use it for those two. And then we'll use the pre-ACT, ACT, those battery assessments for that. Our MTSS is moving right along. It really is more of an organic system that every other week we'll look at very specific data, but what we do most of the time is talk about an individual kid and how we're going to get them over the line and who's going to help. And then our PLCs, like I said, I meet with every PLC in the fourth quarter, and we evaluate how our students are doing in class and then make some goals together as teachers, what we want to get better at.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Thank y'all very much. Great.
Standing,
Great.
really good.
Wow, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Great work.
Can I ask one question?
Oh, somebody's got a question. Yep.
Okay. Do all of your students come through Hot Gap? Main majority?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
That's my only pipeline.
Okay.
It's Hot Gap.
And that seems like a pretty good stepping stone to get in. Okay, yeah.
The converse is not also true.
Oh, okay.
Not all the Hot Gap kids.
Not all
go to
Hot
his
Gap,
school.
okay.
Yeah.
And I
They're living on the island
imagine.
alone.
So it's as you said, it's kind of like a marketing thing, a sale. It's like you need to get out there and
The new
sell
brand.
to school the brand.
Yeah.
We've got T-shirts everywhere that say Future
great
Islander. And I'm like, hey, wear the shirt. Gotta go.
So I think an additive to that is that the pipeline is Hot Gap to St. John's, but the magnet component of it does not feed up to
Okay.
the high school, so you lose a good portion of it.
Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you. Oh,
Michael,
Mr. Miller.
Larson, first question for you is you mentioned that you may need to reassess your freshman academy. What plans do you have working toward that? Because obviously, my other question was going to be what percentage of students that are coming to you are reading below grade level? So
80% are reading below grade level.
80?
80%. That's based on the map. And it's similar with math. So what we're doing is making sure that we've got intervention I don't want to call it remedial, but it's like a step-up program to get ready for the EOC in English.
That's why we have to.
We may even look at an English 1 all year long program so we have more time to bring it up.
What conversations have you had with obviously Hot Gap and some of the other elementary schools for the vertical articulation? So at least when they get to you, I mean, it's really difficult for a high school principal to deal with 80% of their freshmen reading below grade level, and you didn't go, and I'm not going to ask you what level below they are, but have those kind of conversations taking place, and what's been the conversation like from those other principals?
So all year, what Travis and I are in communication all the time to make sure that, one, our programs are aligned, so that like our algebra, if he's passing a kid in Algebra 1, it's the similar expectations of what my kids need to do in Algebra 1 or 8th grade math and so on. So our math teachers are meeting together. It's a long-term solution because it's just a cumulative effect of missing skills along the way. So we really have to use our summertime as to capture and remediate. One of the things that I'm doing specifically is making sure that the parent is totally engaged and understands that this is a problem. So I'll meet with all freshman parents and their students, go over their math data. This is about a mid-year, and look at their GPA because they might not even understand what a GPA is. And then those eyes will open wide and they're like, what do you mean they're not going to be soft? Right. So it's just a shift so that we can get everybody like, oh, now I see the target, I'm with you. And I haven't had a parent disagree.
I just have a quick question. What's your goal? I mean, ideally, where would you like your attendance to be? Your enrollment to be. Sorry, my bad. You have 656.
I want to have every student that lives on Johns Island going to our school.
Right. Yes.
Yep.
And it looks like your biggest competition is James Island.
About 250 students a year.
And then the other ones we go to West Ashley or something? Is that
About 80 kids go to West Ashley.
Okay. Yeah.
But I enjoy the stories of the parents who say, we're coming back.
Yeah, right.
That's great.
I have a couple more questions, not for you, Marcy, though. Mrs. Randall, right, Carrier. As it pertains to your math gap that you mentioned in your presentation, what are some of the struggles you're seeing with the students, and what strategies you think? I know you said you've been there 5 years, so I know you've been able to see a set of trends and teacher coming and going and influx of that. So what's the strategies now moving forward?
Well, I think the biggest thing that we've got to do is set up a system ahead of time. This waiting and hoping they're getting it with what we're providing the other kids is not working, obviously. So the targeted instruction that I mentioned during the presentation, we have to be doing that on a regular basis. And find a way to do it where we're not taking all of their related arts, which is their, kids love related arts in middle school. So it's carving out lunch, opposite time from lunch, maybe that 25 minutes, and doing it on a daily basis and do that targeted instruction. But they obviously need more support over time than the 1 or 2 days here and there that I mentioned. So it's beefing up what that intervention is and having it ready to go at the start of the year. But I do think it's going to take one-to-one all year long.
I've read some articles about principals and school districts looking at students who all fit a certain cohort and kind of lumping them together where you put some, and I want to say your advanced students because you mentioned being able to still push your advanced students and still challenge them in ways that are really sustainable and meaningful for them, but at the same time kind of capture the students who are struggling a little bit. So what are your thoughts on grouping students based on achievement in an effort to raise achievement? Because I think there have been arguments for both across academic spectrum, so I want to get your opinion.
Well, I think it's a danger to just do straight grouping. I think that's been a problem in the past in education. So in my mind, there needs to be a combination of the two. And I think that the kids are grouped more holistically in the classroom. So it's those targeted pullouts, I think, that might be the route to go and the way we're looking at doing this. We have targeted instruction at all levels this year and found good success. My only point is, I think for these particular kids, we need to do that more often. Not just hope that these pullouts here and there work. They obviously have not. So in my mind, it's doing it that 25 minutes every day, just pull them out and do very intensive, specific lessons all year. But that still allows them to be part of everything else that's going on.
And Ms. Berry, for you, I know your enrollments, at all-time teacher high.
I would love more kids. When I first came, it was great.
I
It
know.
was 3+.
And so what are some of the challenges that you're seeing? I know you mentioned several times in your presentation, you mentioned poverty, and several times people say that, my antennas go up and I want to slap somebody. But I think in education, we tend to always equate low performance with poverty. And I think that's, in my estimation, that's always an easy out. Because it's easy to say, well, these kids aren't doing well because they're poor. No, because my mom grew up poor, and everybody in the 60s who were relatively African American grew up poor, but they achieved. And so, what strategies are you using, to your own words, combat the poverty that you're necessarily seeing in the Hollywood Ravenel area to really drive student achievement?
I think when I changed the school to a more academy focus, where teachers don't shut their door and they're isolated and say, these are only my kids. And so everybody in my school has to work on a team. And I kind of build on your strength as a teacher, because in college, if you're teaching, you always go to your strength. So we try to use teacher strength and work together and personalize things, even for them. I need math teachers to work together, just like at the middle school. I need whoever's great at reading, I want you to teach the reading in those grade levels, and the reading teachers work together. So it's not just personalizing the learning for the students, but it's also personalizing for the teachers too. Because I remember I was a middle school teacher. One subject, if I'm teaching all the subjects, it's gonna get, pushed aside. So when my principal did teams and I took math or I took ELA, I was happier as a teacher. I taught what my strength was. Because science, I might try to go out there and grab a couple pieces of dirt or something, but that's not my strength, right? So I really like moving to the academy focus at my school, and I think that it's helped collaborating with Baptist Hill. I always hear Ms. Brown say, I don't want all them kids on load. I said, I got you, but we got to work together. So we vertical align. We're doing a RISE program. This is our second year, and I thank the district for letting me have some freedom to do that. And when you're at the 5th grade level, we've tracked your scores all the way in math, using math and some other indicators, especially your character. If you can go into that middle school, we bring the parents in. The parents love it to see their kids move to middle school a little earlier. We want to do a full year next year. So we've been tracking kids ever since kindergarten. And so we even do an inner track because kids are getting bored. A lot of kids have already mastered their standards, so they need to move on, and we usually do that shift in January for our students across the board from K on up.
Is there a last question? Is there a decent percentage of your incoming kindergartners who attended like a Head Start program or anything like that? And have you seen a difference in achievement with students who necessarily went to a Head Start program versus those who did not?
So they took out Head Start last year. So Ms. Taylor, I asked her, I needed a baby program, infant. So I got that from the Harlem Project. And I have to start even earlier than that, because grandma is tired, great grandma is tired, and they can't give them all they need. They want to, but I had to start the infant program. So we have 2 infant programs that will lead all the way up. And I think I have the right teachers in the younger academy that will make sure those kids are getting what they need. And so far, our test scores, even in the younger age, are way above maybe some of the rest. And we do teach. We can't say we can't teach them how to write their name, because, I noticed that my CD3 teacher, a lot of kids don't know their name when they come to school. And that's unfortunate. But those are the struggles we go through, because just those little things. They have no basic awareness of, I'm in a school. You know, so if we wanted to start earlier, and that's why I'm really appreciative of the infant program. I want more, yes, because that's where it starts.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank y'all
And
very
we
much.
have run out of time.
Yes.
I got a message from Jennifer Coker, so I have one more thing to say. We have been working on all year on a gun violence prevention curriculum K through 12, and we're continuing to fine tune it. I've been some part of that committee, and so that's just a piece of information. It'll be implemented in the fall, right? Hopefully. Hopefully.
Thank you.
And it came from the 4 community members.
Thank you all very much. Great.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your work.
So,
Someone spent $40,000 to keep them.
so
Oh,
we're-
I'm sorry.
Okay, so
I'm
for
not done.
potential consent, we had the A spring textbook adoption, right?
And it was unanimous.
Who's this go to
Okay,
next?
who's next on the list?
Operations.
Operations, who's operations? Michael?
Can we take it just like a 5-minute?
Yeah.